Alison, we can only see the top half of your head.
Oh, that's
She
all I
knows.
can see. I can't raise my chair.
She can't drink her wine.
Oh, there you are. We've got a whole face.
So we're live streaming this meeting for the first time,
Wow.
our YouTube channel. So unless people want to share their comments, then they don't need to join the Zoom. They can just watch straight from us.
Okay.
So are there only 9 people on?
I think so. I think we still have 2
Rob and
hours.
Sue Ellen.
Yeah.
I've got everybody on the middle of my screen instead of over on the right. How do I get them back over on the right?
You'll get them back on the right when she goes to share screen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're just waiting on
Rob and Sue Ellen.
Sue Ellen and Rob, and then we'll be good to go.
I was a little caught by the 4 p.m. start time. I had in my brain 4:15,
Oh, did you?
Oh,
and we didn't have a reminder, or at least I
oh,
didn't.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'll just email them.
You might
That's a
want
good
to
point.
check them. Yeah.
I'm going to just close my office doors as well. I'll be right back.
All right. I suppose you need to say it.
Sherry Johnson, I've never met you, but that's a very cute picture you're showing. It looks like a doodle dog.
It's a Portuguese water dog.
Oh,
Portuguese
that's-
water dog, okay.
Our
Yeah.
friend's next door neighbor used to have one of those.
Very,
They're
very,
Yeah,
hooligans.
they
Very-
were.
very cute.
Lindy and Quincy used to get into all sorts of trouble. Swimming in people's ponds and everything else.
Yeah.
Bronwyn and Sue Ellen are just joining now. So Rob, actually, now that I'm recalling, he did email me last week and said he would be a few minutes late because he's on his way home.
all
So
right.
we have Sue Ellen. So I think it would be
Lovely.
safe to
Hi,
start
Rob.
now.
Got Bonnie.
Bonnie, yeah.
Do we have Robin?
Robin.
Benton? Would have thought.
Doesn't look like she's trying to join.
It took quite a while for the try to join for something to happen.
It's just because I stepped away, but I'm sitting here now and I can see if anyone's trying to join, and it doesn't look like anyone else is right this minute.
All right. Well, that's much better. Well, what do you think? How long is Rob going to be? I think we just carry on.
Yeah, he said that we should start without him. So
Okay. Well, I'll call this committee of the whole to order. And the first thing is the approval of the agenda. Anybody have any issues with that? Okay, it's approved by consensus. We're gonna go right to staff reports. And the Community Economic Development Plan, creating a resilient Bowen Island. Helen Platts. And Helen was here, right there. Yep, there she is. So I went through that report, which is very inclusive. It's amazing. You've done a great job on it. And I'll just pass it over to you, Helen, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So, hello, Mayor and Council, and thank you so much for having me here today. As Gary just mentioned, I'm Helen and I'm the municipality's Community Economic Development Officer. So I'm here today to talk to you about the findings report, which is the first half of what you've got in your agenda package. So I'm just going to share my screen now so you can see what I'm going to be talking about. So just bear with me. I'm just going to share the presentation. So just let me know that you can see that. Everybody can see.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about the Bowen Islands Community Economic Development Plan, or the CED plan for short, because I'm not going to say Community Economic Development every time because it's a bit of a mouthful. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about the findings report. So what are we doing? Well, the overall aim is to write a CED plan that will help Bowen realize its vision of becoming a sustainable, resilient island community and meet our OCP commitment that's up on the slide there. And the CED plan was funded by the 5th intake of BC Government's Rural Dividend Programme to hire a part-time community economic development officer until March 2021 to undertake the development of this plan. Sorry, just getting my mouse over. Why is CED so important for Bowen rather than traditional economic development? Well, the main difference is that CED focuses on creating strong, healthy, resilient communities where community benefits come first, as opposed to traditional economic development, which focuses on wealth creation, where community benefits come second. So CED uses local resources in a community-centered way to foster social, ecological, cultural, environment, and economic resilience. So as we can see, CED is important for Bowen in many ways, but the key above all else is that it's locally driven to provide a local vision that derives local benefit for everyone. So how are we developing this plan? Well, for Bowen, our CED plan process will be undertaken in 3 phases: research, community engagement, and plan completion. Phase 1 of the plan began in July last year with background research into all of our plans, strategies, the OCP, the land use bylaw, past consultation exercises and assets to examine Bowen's current CED outlook. We then looked at our comparator communities to see what they were doing in terms of CED strategies and what useful information we might glean from them to learn from best practices as a means to progress the development of our own CED plan. We're now at the end of phase 1, and I'm here to present the findings of all of that research here today. Oh, sorry, my mouse has gone bananas. So this is what we'll be covering in this presentation here today. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at the end of this presentation. So before we begin, it's probably just worth mentioning that these findings are based on research from lots of different documents and data sources. And the list here is actually only some of them. Now, obviously, I don't expect you to read all of these just now because there's quite a lot. But if you'd like to take a look at the full list, you can actually find it in the appendix of the findings report, and it's on pages 76 and 77. So now we know where our data is from, let's take a look at where Bowen is now. Here are some of our key findings from the research. So the Statistics Canada 2016 Bowen Island census recorded 3,680 people living on Bowen Island. However, it also revealed that there were low numbers in the 0 to 5-year-olds category. This suggests that we may have a possible slow birth rate. There are also low numbers in the youth and young adult population, suggesting that people may be leaving Bowen at high school age and early working age. In contrast, there are larger numbers in the 50+ categories, for example, the 50 to 59 and the 60 to 69 categories. This shows that Bowen has an aging trend that's likely to continue for the next 15 to 20 years. Overall, this suggests Bowen has an aging population, which has implications for housing, transport, employment, the economy, and healthcare. In terms of our workforce, Bowen has a high level of employment overall, with 67.4% of people employed. This is higher than both Canada and the BC rate. And for reference, Canada's current employment rate is 61.8% and British Columbia's is 63%. Bowen also has a well-educated workforce, with nearly half of the working population holding a university certificate, diploma, or degree at bachelor level or above. And if we take a look at fields of study, we can see the top field of study is business management and public administration, with most students specializing in business and marketing. Second is social sciences and law, with most students specializing in legal professions and studies. And third is engineering and related fields, with most students specializing in engineering. In contrast, only 7.5% have an apprenticeship, trade certificate or diploma. And furthermore, only 7.5% choose to go into health education. So if we now compare this with what fields people are actually working in, we can see this. From the Bourne Island business license data, Bourne's top employer is Doc Morgan's. Now these are a full service restaurant in the field of accommodation and food. The second top employer is the Ruddy Potato Whole Foods Market. So these guys are in the field of supermarkets and other grocery and convenience stores. And the third top employer is the Orchard Recovery Centre. And these guys are a residential substance abuse facility in the field of healthcare and social assistance. So if we take these two pieces of information together, so that's education and employment, I'm going to just go back to the previous slide there. I'm just going to jump up to, that's this one. We can see this. What this means is there's probably likely to be significant numbers of people working either outside of their field of study or under their level of qualifications in order to retain on-island employment, given the span of Bourne's top employers, versus the top fields of study. The island is also lacking in qualified tradespeople, with only 7.5% with an apprenticeship, trades or certificate or diploma. And although trades are not represented in the top on-island employers that have a business license, we know from anecdotal evidence that trades are a key on-island job. We have the same issue in persons qualified in healthcare, with only 7.5% choosing this discipline. However, healthcare is the second top rated job by industry on and off island, and Bourne's third top employer. To put this into numbers, if all of these people worked on island, this means that just over 1 in 10 households, we had 1,495 according to the 2016 census, would have access to some kind of qualified tradesperson or healthcare worker at any given time, and it wouldn't necessarily be in the field they needed. Of course, further demographic from the demographic information, we now know that healthcare is likely to become an area of demand, and the trades are already in demand and likely to increase. Moving on to individual workers now. Target 4 of the CED plan is the reduced need to commute to further Bourne's ambition towards being a self-reliant, healthy, rural community. The Statistics Canada 2016 Bourne Island census recorded 1,170 people commuting to their usual place of work. Of these, 705 travelled off island and 945 worked on Bourne, with 480 working from home. It also showed that more than 52%, that's 615 commuters, travelled 60 minutes or more to get to work. However, as the data does not distinguish between on-island and off-island travel for travel times information, we'd need further data to fully understand commuter journeys, destinations, and employment desires. For example, would our off-island commuters switch to working all-island should the opportunity arise? The increase of quality of life is one of the main aims of sustainable community economic development. Within this, appropriate housing is one of the major issues affecting quality of life. As a Bourne-wide housing needs assessment is currently being undertaken, this report uses information from the Statistics Canada 2016 census on 2 key areas. These are household size and occupied dwellings by number of bedrooms. This data found that there were 1,495 households on Bourne in 2016. Of these, the largest household category was 2-person households, and there were 610 of these in this category overall. The second largest was 1-person households, and there were 340 of these overall. In comparison, the largest category of occupied private dwellings was 3 bedrooms, and there were 620 of these overall. And the second largest was 4+ bedrooms, and there were 390 of these overall. So as you can see, the information suggests that there may be a discrepancy between household size and occupied dwelling size. But of course, the housing needs assessment will provide further information on all of this. Population mobility measures migration within a population. Now for Bourne, the movement of people on and off island has a huge impact sociological factors, including the island's culture, economic growth, housing markets, and demand for services. So information from our 2016 census found that there were 3,095 non-movers between 2015 and 2016 versus 2,065 between 2011 and 2016. Of these, 565 people moved between 2015 and 2016 versus 1,465 between 2011 and 2016. That's approximately 8.28% per year. Of these movers, between 2015 and 2016, 260 people stayed on Bowen and 310 moved off island. And between 2011 and 2016, 515 people stayed on Bowen and 950 moved off island. So the reason I'm telling you this is basically to show that people tend to stay on island once they've moved here, but if they do move, then we have a higher tendency to move off island. This does seem to be reducing somewhat though. It should be noted that we have done some surveys to see why people move to Bowen and why they move off island, but our response rates have been low. And if you want to know more on that, you can ask me later on. But we do need to find out a little bit more about that, I think, in future, just to see why people move and why they move off island. So one of the main things for economic development is understanding our on-island businesses, because it's hugely important for business retention and growth strategies. So the following data has been taken from the Statistics Canada labour market statistics and our Bowen Island business license data to compare BC's top 5 growth industries and Bowen's current top 5 businesses. So for our key findings here, we found that of Bowen's top 5 businesses, there's only one that's represented in BC's top 5 growth industries, and that's healthcare. What we also found was that Bowen has a heavy slant towards accommodation of food-related businesses, and this is not represented in BC's top 5 growth industries. So what we'll need to find out is that if these results reflect our unique island needs, or if there's a disconnect between Bowen Island and BC's trends, so that we can identify what our business retention and growth strategy is going to look like. It should be noted that not all businesses on Bowen have licenses. So our data in this section is limited. For example, the Bowen business license data has only been in place since 2019, as we all know, and there is no current established information for on-island growth industries. We also know that 2 of Bowen's largest employers, for example, Bowen Island Municipality, which has 45.7 full-time employees, and Bowen Island Community School, which has 52 employees, are not represented here because they are government bodies and so they don't require business licenses. There is further information here that says, according to the business licenses, there are 355 businesses on Bowen, and they total a total of 1,014 employees. However, the census data tells us, in terms of employees, that there are 1,026 employees altogether. And we know from previous information that 465 are traveling to a place of work, 480 are working from home. So that means there are some discrepancies in our data, which we'd need to take a further look at if we wanted to know what was happening here. So as we all know, within our businesses and within our employment, tourism is a growing industry, and BC saw 6 million international visitors in 2018 alone. Obviously, this has huge impacts on revenue and on job creation. Now, Bowen Island is no different to this, and we've seen rising numbers in visitors over the past few years. So these are the 2015 to 2019 increases recorded by both BC Ferries and our very own Bowen Island Visitor Centre. So BC Ferries saw a 17.5% increase between 2015 and 2019. That was rising from 158,358 full fare passengers to 186,079 full fare passengers. In comparison, the visitor centre saw an increase between 2015 and 2019 also, and that rose from 6,347 visitors to 31,096 visitors. It should also be noted that their services have increased year on year to deliver more services to the visitors that they've been servicing. It should be noted though that the BC Ferries data only defines the difference between full fare users and experience card users. They don't define visitor types. And the visitor centre is only open from May to September, and they can't possibly capture all visitors. So further information would be needed to understand visitor types and duration. So for example, people coming for day trips, longer to stay tourists, people visiting relatives and so on, just to get a better picture of Bowen Island's tourism needs so that we can develop a more strategic tourism plan. It should also be noted that concerns have been raised by residents regarding the effects of increasing visitors to the island. So for example, according to the Bowen Island residents' perceptions of tourism on Bowen Island survey that we did in 2015, these are the top 3 concerns that were raised regarding tourism. 74.3% of respondents agreed that tourism has created crowding at ferries terminals. 30% felt that tourism created user problems in some beaches, parks and trails. And 26.6% believe that tourism contributed towards water shortages. Now, of course, further data would be needed to see if these concerns were actually founded, but either way, I think that residents' concerns regarding tourism need to be taken into account during the development and implementation of any CED initiatives. So economic leakage is hugely important for anything that we promote to do with economic development. And that refers to money that leaks out of the local economy through expenditures on goods and services. So examples for Bowen include things like off-island shopping and bought-in services such as food provision and trades. So it's important to understand the economic leakage for us because these areas can create jobs and business opportunities for a more self-sufficient community. So an initial analysis of shopping preferences was undertaken through the Bowen Island survey in 2019, just to create a snapshot for us moving forward. So the results from this revealed that 65% of our respondents reported buying their groceries on Bowen, and 48% also bought their household supplies on Bowen. So that's great news. However, only 1/3, that was about 35% of the respondents, reported buying their health and beauty supplies on Bowen, and less than 1/4, that was 21%, bought their clothing and apparel on Bowen, with many of them preferring West Vancouver or Vancouver instead. Positively, 64% chose Bowen for their recreation and entertainment purposes, and 80% chose Bowen for meals and dining out. Of course, the survey results only captured a small snapshot of Bowen's population. So the response rate was actually only 454 people. And as we know, the census recorded 3,680 people. So 454 is about 12% of our population. So we would need to get a wider snapshot of people just to understand the full extent of household and government spending, thus our overall leakage. So asset mapping is one of the other exercises that we undertake as part of an economic development study. And so this is something that identifies what positive resources the community has available to it at the present time and where any asset gaps might be. So Bowen's assets were mapped using local knowledge and previous consultation exercises. Now it's worth noting at this stage that the list of assets and asset gaps is not exhaustive and will be expanded during the community engagement phase and the later stages of the CED plan development, because of course Bowen does actually have quite a lot of assets. So the ones arising from this research were grouped into themes and turned into mind maps of key assets and asset gaps. So in terms of the key assets, these were that Bowen has a wide variety of community groups and amenities. It has an abundance of natural beauty. We have many unique businesses and restaurants. We are close, but not too close to the city. And we have a unique community culture that is welcoming and safe. For asset gaps, the research reflected we have infrastructure and amenity needs, such as accommodation and sustainable transport, including the ferry and parking. We also have on-island employment needs, business resiliency, and cost of living challenges. There are demographic challenges such as population gaps. Our proximity to Vancouver causes some concerns. And we have a requirement for communal gathering spaces and sources of civic pride. The document and consultation research included reviewing the official community plan and the land use bylaw for conflicts, plus various strategies, plans, and past consultation exercises between 2007 and 2020 for key activities, objectives, and issues to understand what is in place or is needed or programmed to identify linkages. From this, 3 key themes emerged. These were economic sustainability with a focus on existing business needs, for example, business expansion and retention, and local retail, for example, buying local and business visibility, and strategic tourism for year-round opportunities. Community resilience with a focus on infrastructure, business resilience, particularly after emergency and disaster, and food growing initiatives to support employment opportunities and reduce reliance on external food supplies. And lastly, quality of life with a focus on protecting our island's unique culture and natural environment, placemaking opportunities and better development to encourage healthier and more economic living situations, employment and income opportunities, demographic opportunities such as how to retain our youth population and leverage our senior population, and improve community health and well-being through cohesive healthcare and well-being initiatives. So these, the information gathered here will be used in phase 2, which as we know is the community engagement phase, and phase 3, which is the plan development phase, as we map out potential CED opportunities and identify SMART goals for the CED plan. So what are our comparators doing in their CED plans? Well, the answer is quite a lot. Because we could do an entire presentation just on those, we're going to talk about a couple of top level highlights. So the first is the top 2 CED principles for each of our 3 main comparator communities. And the second is the top learning points Bowen can use for the development of our own CED plan. So just as a reminder, our top 3 comparator communities were Gabriola, a rural island community with an aging, decreasing population that's also part of the island's trust. Ucluelet, a small coastal community with a high employment rate and a youthful population. And West Vancouver, an aging bedroom community with affordable housing issues that's close to Vancouver. Now, it is acknowledged that West Vancouver has some demographic differences to Bowen Island, but they're still a useful comparator because of the issues they face and their CED initiatives. Now we've refreshed our memories, here are the top 2 CED principles for each of our main comparators. For Gabriola, their main focus was strategic tourism and branding to market the culture and climate of Gabriola and promote Gabriola as a place to live and work. They also promoted economic initiatives that spoke to their community, such as asset inventory, population growth, funding, and small business growth for artisans and youth. For Ucluelet, their main focus was to invest in Ucluelet's human potential by supporting Ucluelet's population to live and work. They also sought to enhance their physical infrastructure for economic development by providing the infrastructure for CED initiatives such as employment, land use, transport, and telecommunications. West Vancouver's core focus was a value of tourism and visitor attraction strategy to support existing West Vancouver businesses by attracting visitor spending at a time when the local population is declining, and included value of tourism and visitor offerings. Their second focus was the development of commercial hubs, for example, Drumdrave and Ambleside, to create opportunities for new business startups and to grow local employment opportunities. So in addition to these key CED principles, we looked at how those CED plans were developed to understand key learning points for the development of our own plan. And the key learning points we took away were all of our comparators plans focused on the importance of community and local businesses, in particular how to retrain and grow their local businesses, and strategic tourism. Their consultation processes and plan development were generally short and with focused groups. Their CED initiatives tied in with the strategic missions and values and were backed by the community and governing body. and they use consultants and additional help, such as administration staff, volunteers, and university students where necessary to aid the consultation and development processes. So, what does all of this research mean for Bowen Island? Well, there's no doubt that Bowen has an abundance of key assets that make it as a desirable destination for residents, especially amongst recent retirees and seniors. And as we can see from this SWOT analysis, we have various opportunities that will help us move towards our goal of being a more resilient and sustainable community. However, like many of our comparators, the research reflects that more needs to be done in terms of strategic tourism, local business retention and expansion strategies, living and working within our community, addressing high cost of living and demographic gaps, and improving our community's overall quality of life. And of course, despite the fact we want to be an independent island community, we must still pay close attention to the wider impacts of climate, economic, governmental, and other changes that can greatly affect our community. So I'm sure by now you're beginning to see that everything is connected, as this Bowen CED snapshot here shows. However, we do need to acknowledge that we have gaps in certain areas of our information, with the findings report supporting the following information gathering exercises for the development of the CED plan so that everything does connect up and we can become a more sustainable and resilient community. These further information requirements are as follows. An economic leakage study to understand household, business and government spending off island. Additional community surveys such as population mobility and quality of life. Employment surveys on jobs, incomes and commuting, business retention and expansion surveys, tourism surveys to understand our visitor data, and of course we'll need the housing needs assessment data. All of these will help us address some of the asset gaps we previously mentioned and support some of the ongoing initiatives of our current strategies, as well as providing information for our key CED activities and our key focus areas for the development of the CED plan. Now, I know all of this may sound a little overwhelming. Perhaps you might be thinking it's all doom and gloom. Well, good news. I've actually saved the best finding till last. The finding at the core of all of the research was one main theme running across everything. Bowen Island is unique. No one can quite compare to Bowen's uniquely rural island, yet municipality run nature just a stone's throw away from one of the world's top 50 cities. And that is what makes us so special. And so if we are to retain Bowen's unique nature, we must develop a CED plan that not only provides for our sustainable and resilient future, but one which encourages our community to thrive as an independent rural island community. So, next steps to achieve this lofty goal? Well, we'll be using all of our research findings, plus the information the community has already been good enough to share with us over the past few years to start phase 2 of the CED plan, the community engagement phase. The question, what kind of community do we want Bowen to be? In this way, the citizens of Bowen will be an integral part of the CED plan development to ensure it stays true to the promise made in our official community plan, and above all else, our Bowenness, as we work towards our vision of Bowen Island as a resilient and sustainable island municipality within the Islands Trust. We'll discuss that further in a moment, but for now, thank you very much for listening. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the findings?
Yeah, very well done. Helen, can you hear me there?
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Like I said, it was quite a compendium of wonderfulness.
I know.
There's a lot of information there. A couple of things. I mean, there's so much information and there's so much history in all this information that you've got now. When we do the 2020 census, which will come out, I don't know, a couple of years, whatever it is, will we be able to put that into the matrix and see where we were from 16 to 20?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I'm interested to do. I mean, obviously, as a non-citizen, I can't be part of that. So that's one of the questions I need to ask. So when do the censuses actually come out? So when do they actually run them?
I think it's every 4 years, isn't it? I could be
So,
mistaken.
I know it's 2020, and obviously the data won't come out in 2020, will it? It'll be the following year, I think. Yeah, can you tell, Maureen?
Yeah, it's 2021. It's every 5 years.
That's
Data
okay.
doesn't roll out until at least 2022.
Yeah.
Base when it rolls.
Okay. So when do they actually ask the questions? Do you know? Is it like the beginning of the year, the later on in the year?
I think, and Allison might confirm this, I think it's usually around May or so.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say. And then it's a good year for the results to come out.
That's what I thought. Okay. So I think, yeah, we probably could, but it's going to be a wee while before we get the data. But I think we still should compare it because I think it's going to be really important for us to be able to do that.
All right. Anybody else? Michael, you look quick. Yeah, go ahead.
Gary, firstly, thank you so much for this. This is actually the third time I've been through this report. And I get it, Helen, there is so much information. I guess what I'm going to try and have to do is say, you've collated all this information. Now I kind of got to break it down and see which parts of it I'm going to most utilize. Where am I going to go to get?
Yeah.
I mean, you've itemized everything. There is an index. There is nothing lacking from your point of view. So again, thank you. It's just a very considerable information, and maybe the major takeaways is it would be nice to get some wins as a result. What
Yeah.
you feel would be if you had to point at a couple of issues and you said, if we focused on this bit of information, I feel from my research, what I've done so far, this would give us the best return. What if you like your favorite areas of the report which you think could take us somewhere?
I think, oh gosh, that's a really tricky question because obviously economic development is so huge, or community economic development is even bigger. So I think the thing for us, given the current circumstances that we're facing, you know, is going to be, we need to, because usually what you do with a plan like this is you do quick wins, then you do medium wins, and then you do longer term wins. What we'll need to do is we need to identify some quick wins that are going to be super important for our business community in particular, because that at the moment is going to be the most important in terms of resiliency. One of the key things obviously that we've been doing is these meetings on the Wednesday mornings with our business community. And so I think really listening to them about some of their key needs is going to be what focuses us for some of the quick wins for our actions. So a lot of the things that are coming forward from them, how is my business going to survive, you know, what's currently happening. So I think that's where our focus needs to be, and what some of the actions are that we can take to try and help them you know, move forward given what we're currently faced with. What we know, we can also learn from some of our you know, communities that are similar to us, because we, like a lot of them, are reliant on tourism, or we have been, and so we're going to need to really look at that and how we're going to move that forward, because obviously at the moment that isn't a thing that any of us can do. So we really do need to look at how we move forward as a previously a tourism-based community, and how we are going to move forward in a sort of sustainable and resilient way. And so there are lots of, Nelson is a good example of that. A lady posted up on the Everything Else page today about what Nelson is doing to move forward as a tourism-based community, to try and support their community now that, you know, that isn't something that they can do. So I think that's probably going to be one of our core focuses, and a quick focus too. So a lot of it's going to be about how we pivot, you know, our focus, I think, towards our business community.
All right. Anybody else? I was just, I had a question. Okay, sorry, David, go ahead.
Can't hear you.
You're muted, David. Yeah, I forgot about my mute. Yeah. Really interesting. Thanks, Helen. Lots of really interesting information, some of which surprised me a bit. A couple of things. Well, one of the obvious issues is the housing issue. And we've got another report in our later meeting that helps us understand that for so many employers, we don't have the housing that our employees need. But one of the interesting things that popped out from what you just said was the health industry. The health industry is one of the big growth areas, or the biggest areas in the province.
Yeah.
And you know, when you look at our demographics, we've got bulges in the young folks and the old folks. Those are the two areas that most need healthcare. And so that aligns nicely with the health center, the work that's being done on that. But the other data that you had is how many people on Bowen commute off island to work in the health sector, which is quite surprised me. So that seems like there's, you know, a possible opportunity there that could be quite interesting. The work on leakage obviously is important as well. You know, obviously for fashion and things of that sort, you've got all kinds of choices in the bigger cities, so it's really hard to compete. And then when you've got the volume prices as well, and you know, the Costco's, it's hard to compete with our general store. So they're really tricky issues, but if there's some ways of finding some opportunities there, I think that's really interesting. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts, but you know, thanks for this work, and I'll look forward to the next phase.
All right, Sue Ellen.
Yeah, thank you for this report. It's fascinating, and I haven't been that close to it for a couple of years, since back when we were figuring out how we could get a report like this going. And I was speaking to the OCP, so I'm glad to see it. I did have a question about the demographics that you showed right near the beginning, about where you mentioned, you showed the age demographics in the table, and you said maybe it was a slow birth rate. And you know, from my perspective, I have a feeling what I understand is that people with young families move to Bowen. And that's what I've been told over the years, is they come to Bowen because it's a safe, healthy environment with nature to raise their children. So I think that might fit in with your moving data. Would you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I think what we can see is that people move to Bowen and they, you know, to raise their kids. But what we're finding is that people are having less children overall. And so although people do move here for sure, and although Bowen Island certainly is a place that people raise families, so when we look at us in a picture of BC, not even just a picture of the Islands Trust, but in a picture of BC, we definitely have more, you know, kids and families around. But in general, people are having less children overall. And so if you look at it, this is why the next census is going to be really interesting, because it'll be interesting to see, you know, how many children people are actually having, because that will reflect, that will really show us what those numbers look like in comparison to what they've been. So what I've done is looked at, in comparison to what they were and what they were in 2016, they've definitely dropped. So people are definitely having less kids. So although yes, people definitely move here to raise families, it's less in comparison to what it was. And so it does show that the birth rate is slowing. So although people move here to raise a family, it's less than what it was, if you see what I mean. And so that obviously then has knock-on effects for how many people you've got then going through the system, and what that has for us in terms of how many people you've got in terms of being around to employ, and you know, X, Y, and Z. So that's why it's an interesting statistic for us, because obviously, you know, can we keep those people around? Are we going to have people that work in the shops? Are we going to have people that are going to look after, you know, old Aunt Fanny and, you know, Granny and Grandpa and all the rest of it, because they physically aren't here. And so that's why it's an interesting number. But if you actually look at that sort of curve, people go off island, but then they come back again, you know, in the sort of late 30s, early 40s, and you can see it start to slowly climb back up again. But there is a definite drop in some of the key working age groups. And so, yeah, it's an interesting sort of up and down for us. So I'm really interested to see what this new census shows us in terms of the data.
Okay. A follow-up question, Helen. So your words, the slower birth rate, is that something you don't just mean on Bowen Island, you mean generally in British Columbia?
Well, I think generally in British Columbia, we all have that issue, but obviously for us, we're interested in Bowen, because, you know.
Okay, I just wondered if it was specific to Bowen or for.
No, that is specific to Bowen, but you know, that graph is specific to Bowen. So Bowen,
Right.
we have a slow birth rate, but so does the rest of BC. So
Thank you. Yeah,
we're all suffering the same problem.
gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
Maureen?
Yeah, and thank you, Helen. It's a much stronger report than we saw earlier.
Yay! I'm so glad you have. Woo!
Okay.
No, I'm done.
So we have two recommendations before us, guys. One is the receipt of the report, and the second is to approve an engagement plan. I'm going to propose that we sever those recommendations. I'm perfectly glad to receive the report. I think it's appropriate. I think it would be a valuable addition. I am extremely worried about improving an engagement plan with the business community that's oriented towards the development of a long-term community economic plan at this time. When I look at the schedule for the engagement, it seems really inappropriate to be doing this kind of work during the circumstances that we are in right now. So I would like to move to sever, and conversation can continue.
Thank you. Allison, sorry.
Is there not a second presentation on the engagement plan to be coming forward? Hope's nodding. So I'm quite happy to hear both and then receive this findings report now, and then we'll deal with the other motion after we've heard the engagement report.
Yeah, so I'll move the receipt.
Okay,
Second.
thanks to Ellen. And any further discussion on the entire one, or just are you gonna?
The receipt of the report.
Okay.
Just the first half.
Okay.
Receipt for the findings report.
All right. Any further discussion on that before we vote? Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? And opposed? Nobody. Okay. Thank you. All right. And I guess the second part is committee of the whole recommend the council approve the phase 2. We're not going to do that then at this point in time. Is that?
Gary, there's a second report to be presented.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
The second report is also in this plan. Is Helen going to, in the agenda, is Helen going to present that today?
Yes,
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, okay. That's where I was a little bit-
momentarily.
Yeah, okay.
Gotcha.
Just one more question on that one, Helen. Sorry, I should have piped up there, but what do you see? And there's lots of graphs there, and I'm sure the information is there. But what do you see? Are the commuters as a percentage of the working force on Bowen, is it increasing, decreasing?
Commuters, was that, sorry?
The same.
The commuters, was that the question? The commuters?
Commuters as a percentage of the workforce on Bowen, is it increasing or?
No, it's staying roughly the same. Looking at it across the years, I mean, it's ever so slightly increased, but it's not. Actually, it's pretty stable. You know, it's always between about 60 and sort of 62%, and it's you know, it's never gone crazy either way. So it's looking at it across the years. Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting statistic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to go ahead on phase 2 then?
Yeah. Let me just. I've got to get onto my laptop screen, so just give me a sec. Okay, hang on. Okay. I know it looks exactly the same, but it's not. It's a different one.
We always like looking at Bowen Island.
Yeah, who doesn't? It's lovely. All right, so this one. So thank you very much for signing off the findings report. I really appreciate that, because that was, well, you saw it was enormous. So thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to look over it and sign it off. Thank you for the brilliant questions. So this is for phase 2. So this is the community engagement phase. And it's a lot quicker, you'll be pleased to know. So, sorry, my mouse has gone absolutely bananas. Just give me one sec. It's stuck on my laptop screen. Here we go. Okay. So as you'll recall, just a quick recap, our aim is to write a CED plan that will help Bowen realise its vision of becoming a sustainable, resilient island community and meet our OCP commitment that's up on the screen there. And the CED plan was funded by the 5th intake of the BC Government's Rural Dividend Programme. And the goal is to complete the plan by March 2021. So the CED plan process is undertaken in 3 phases: research, community engagement, and plan completion. So you've just signed off phase 1 with the findings report. So now we're on to phase 2, which is the community engagement phase. So you'll find the phase 2 public participation strategy in your agenda package. And if you want to follow along, you can do that as I run through the main overview, and you can see what I'm proposing that we'll do. So this is what we'll be covering in this presentation. And of course, again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got at the end of the presentation. So why is community engagement so important for the development of our CED plan? Well, community engagement is important because it allows us to do a few things. One is to cultivate project awareness, and that maximizes our stakeholder engagement. Another is to provide key information that's relevant and accurate for meaningful public engagement. It identifies our community needs, and that's important for developing preferences to inform the CED visioning process and the CED plan development. And it maintains our communications that ensure transparency and accountability throughout the process, which ensures our participation is fair and accessible. So that ensures that we develop a clear, shared CED vision to define what we want Bowen to be and where it's going for a resilient and sustainable future. So this is what we already know based on our previous engagement exercises. So as discussed in the findings report, Bowen's already undertaken quite an extensive community consultation over the years, and much of it has touched on community economic development themes. So as I noted before, there were many points that arose from these, but there were 3 main themes that came. So just to refresh your memories, these were economic sustainability with a focus on existing business needs, for example, business expansion and retention, community resilience with a focus on infrastructure, business resilience, and food growing initiatives. And lastly, quality of life with a focus on protecting our island's unique culture, placemaking opportunities, and income opportunities. So if you'd like more detailed information on that, it can all be found in the findings report, and that's on pages 21 to 28. So in terms of phase 2, this is what our engagement plan looks like. So these are the key stakeholders that we've identified that will need to engage with as part of the CED plan visioning and development process. So as you can see, we've broken them out into key citizens. So that's people like residents and workers, the key businesses in the various sectors and industries on the island, and key groups on the island. And of course, we've got a detailed list of who those groups are. And we've also identified our key partners in government, both at a provincial and a local level. And again, I've got a detailed list of who those are. And of course, it's recognised that this list may develop as we undertake the engagement exercises to include additional stakeholders. Of course, we understand that there can be certain challenges when it comes to engagement, either through certain groups that are difficult to reach or just through the methods in which they receive information. So the main ones to identified for this particular CED plan have been identified as follows. The digital divide, so that's people without access to the internet. Accessibility, so that's people who can't physically access the event, or people who have constraints such as time, childcare requirements, or transportation needs. People's learning styles, so for example, people who are more visual learners versus people who read information. And a lack of knowledge, so that's people who simply just don't know what the project or CED is all about and what we're doing. So to address some of these issues, a variety of communication tools have been selected to address the considerations. So we're going to have a set of standards that we use for consistency across the project and also across the communication methods that we use. There'll always be a key contact so people know who to contact across the whole project. We'll develop a CED page as a central place for all of our project information so people know where to go. We'll be using the social media, in particular the BIM social media and Facebook page, so that people know where to go and that we can use it to advertise our community events and information. We're going to be using the BIM e-letter so that again we can put information and events. We'll be using paid advertising where necessary to advertise our events and make sure that information gets out to people, and using strategic press releases where necessary, again for information and advertisement of it. We also will be making sure that there's comment forms available online and in paper form throughout the duration of the plan development so that people can get their views across whenever they feel it's necessary and whenever they want to. So these are the main engagement methods that we're going to be using throughout phase 2 to ensure that we have a successful engagement process and that we successfully disseminate information to people in a variety of methods and ways. So we're going to begin with the public project launch. So that would be after I've talked to you guys. So this really just increases the project awareness so that people know why we're doing what we're doing and what the CED project's all about. Prior to us undertaking any engagement. So that really just makes sure that people know what we're doing. And it maximizes engagement because people actually understand what everything is and where it is. We then have an awareness campaign that runs throughout the duration of the project. And this is for the same reason as the public project launch. It just runs throughout the duration. We use public information sessions. So these are organized, you know what these are, they're organized open invitation meetings, usually with presentations and take-home materials. Obviously, these are now likely to be online because of the current situation. So we're going to make sure that these are made as accessible as possible, and we'll make sure that they're advertised and shared openly and accessibly so that as many people as possible can come to those. We're going to be using a variety of community surveys online and in paper form so that people can get their insights across and we can gather information, and that allows us to get some statistical data as well as qualitative data so that we can compare things. We'll be using workshops as well so that we can hone in on information and use some of that wider range of information and just hone it down so that we can develop some of the visions and thoughts down into key actions and initiatives. We also, I've just got to move my screen here, sorry. We also will be doing consultation updates throughout the engagement process, informed and up to date on everything that's going on and the information that we get back so that people are informed throughout the entire process. And then we have a report and review phase at the very end of it so that we can give a summary of people's feedback and to thank them for participating, because it's important that we do that throughout the process. So now that you know what the techniques are, this is our engagement timeline, the overall timeline that we're going to do, and it takes place in 2 main stages. So the first stage is stage 1, and that's the engage stage. So this runs from now until mid-July. So this encompasses the project launch, as I discussed previously, and that includes the launch of the CED webpage. It also includes the community-based surveys, so both community-wide and a more focused business retention and needs survey. So they're both to be based on previous successful surveys undertaken by our comparator communities, such as Pemberton Village and Galliano. We'll be holding a variety of workshops, both for the community and business community, and these will help us develop the community CED visioning process of what our community wants a sustainable and resilient Bowen Island to look like. So these workshops will be led by a trained facilitator, and obviously they'll be recorded too, and they tie into our currently running business Zoom meetings that are being held by the CEDC on Wednesday mornings. Again, they'll be based on successfully led workshops from some of our key comparators who've already undertaken and shared their processes with us. And the previously mentioned awareness campaign had run throughout the duration of this phase to maintain project awareness and communicate our event activities and information. So the stage is the review stage, and that follows the main body of the engagement. So that runs from mid-July to the end of August and beginning of September. That encompasses the thank you that I mentioned earlier, just to make sure that we say thanks very much to everyone for participation, because that's really important. It includes a review of the consultation materials and feedback that everybody's provided, because that will form a big body of the CED plan. And it includes a preparation of consultation review so that we can do the report ready for presentation to council in late fall, so that we meet our March 2021 deadline. And it'll also include a short consultation snapshot on the CED webpage and BIM social media of key highlights for the community, so that they know that their feedback is important to us and that we can give them a quick snapshot of what they've been saying. So these are going to be our next steps. We'll take all of the research findings that we have found in the findings report, plus the information the community has already shared with us over the past few years, and of course the stuff we've been gathering recently in the Zoom meetings, to start our CED plan engagement process. And we'll use that so that we can officially launch our CED project in the public realm. And that means that we develop our CED webpage as a centralized place for information. We'd also prepare and launch our community surveys to start building our community vision of Bowen's resilient and sustainable future. And we build our on our online consultation already taking place with our businesses and communities, so that we could start to create our shared vision and the path to take Bowen forward in a sustainable and resilient way, as we ask the question, what does a resilient and sustainable Bowen Island look like to you? So today is the start of that process, so we can build our clear shared community vision for Bowen's sustainable future. And I hope that you're as excited about that as I am.
Certainly are. Okay,
Thank you so much.
Sue?
Oh, thank you for the report, Helen. I can see there's a lot of careful planning that's gone into this, and it looks like a fabulous engagement project, and the obvious next steps. If we were in normal times, I don't think we're in normal times, and I don't want to be a wet blanket. My question is there an opportunity here to observe the Bowen economy through this COVID crisis to answer the question, are we a resilient and sustainable community? And that will help us towards the future that you're talking about, the resilient and sustainable future. It just seems to me like we're in this moment of the COVID crisis where it may not be possible to carry out the engagements. I don't think we get that kind of engagement. People are preoccupied and concerned, but also, so it's not the best time for it, but also, you know, I think it might be disruptive and that kind of thing too, but basically, could we, and I don't know the answer to this, but is it an opportunity to research and document what happens through this crisis? While everybody else is busy coping with it, would it be helpful to observe it and watch the behavior of our community and what happens to it? And so this is just research and document now, for example, now till mid-July of what you talked about as the first phase. Could this be like a case study that might even help other communities? Maybe we can get some grant funding or something. I doubt it, but maybe. And would it be helpful in the overall project, which is, you know, to develop a plan that leads to a resilient and sustainable future for Bowen Island? So I'm interested in exploring that. I just looking at it from that kind of point of view, thinking of redirecting our activity perhaps to take this opportunity to observe the community in this very challenging moment and to see whether there are things we can learn that would help Bowen in the future. So that's my, it's a very big question. I don't expect you to have an answer here, but if you've got any comments, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to other councillors.
Any response to that, Helen?
I think I want to listen to what other people have got to say first.
All right. Anybody else? Maureen, you want
After David.
to? Okay, David.
Okay, and I unmuted myself. I think, well, I'm going to agree that we need to wait and I'll let Maureen talk about that because for all the reasons, they're obvious. But I just want to say I've got one other comment, and it's the very first statement on your public participation plan. It said the objective, and it's got the objective, I'll just read it, is to provide the further community input upon which the plan will be built. I find that's a very weak statement about what's needed here. All the data you've given us so far is about the status quo. Here's what we have, here's what we've done in the past. But the community economic development plan needs to go from that and to look forward, to think of the future. Where can we go? What are the opportunities? And that doesn't come from looking at the data, that comes from talking to people. And so it seems to me that the objective of this is actually got to be a much more powerful statement. You've got a couple of them further down on that same page. A plan to collaborate and empower the residents, businesses, and key stakeholders of Bowen Island in the development of the Community Economic Development Plan. I think the objective has got to be something much more strongly stated about using the basically to empower some of the people who could be involved to help us develop this plan. I don't want to give you the words right now, but you have one later on in terms of your key messages that is sort of, I'm just scrolling down to try to find it. Here it is. Key messaging: help us create a resilient and sustainable Bowen Island. Help us create a community economic development plan. Really, that's what this next stage is all about. It's engaging Bowen Island's key people to help create this plan. So that's my only comment so far. You got all kinds of great activities, and I think we can get there. But we also now need to wait, and I'll let Maureen talk about that.
Yeah.
Maureen?
Yeah, so I do feel that this is not the right time to be doing this particular piece of work. And what we have to keep in mind is that this is a provincially funded project that was approved with a particular timeline and specific deliverables to council and to the province. So it's not just a matter of as you suggested, Sue Ellen, of just our pivoting and changing the direction of what we're doing here. We actually have to do any kinds of change to the project in consultation with the province. And I think, personally, I think the province would be amenable to hearing a request for putting this on pause for a little while and a potential extension to the completion date. I think the notion of observing what goes on in the community is important, but I think that there are other ways that we can observe what's going on in the community rather than redirecting this project in that direction. I think the business community would be extremely irritated with us if we were to just barrel on through with this work at this time. I think there's something else that is needed. And because my ultimate goal in this was to get us a community economic development plan, I want us to keep that as a goal and recognize that COVID is in the mix. We need to see where we land once we're out of this and then pick this work up again, keeping our wits about us for the next couple of months and paying attention to what is going on. So for that reason, I want to move to either defer or to put forward a recommendation that we get in contact with the province and request an extension to the project itself.
Anybody else right now? Michael?
Gary, just to wrap it up. I mean, hate to say you agree with everything else, but this is a timing issue right now based on what's happened. So I would just concur, without being wordy, with what David and Maureen have said, whilst in no way wishing to detract from Helen's work. The time is going to be critical. I'm not sure now is just right. So that's what we've got to work our way through.
Allison, and then back to Sue.
I'm agreeing with Maureen and David and Michael, and the timing to start launching engagements and doing surveys and everything else just isn't right. But one of the things that is happening is sort of the weekly meetings using Zoom with the business community and whatever. And I think that is going to be getting us some good data on businesses and resiliency and what the issues are. So I would hope by putting that we can, carry on with that. But whether that's part of the plan or more part of the Economic Development Committee work plan is something else. But approaching the province and trying to get a deferral for the final deliverable, and the grant was to deliver a community economic development plan. So I think we need to ask that question first, and I don't see that they would think it was unreasonable at this point.
No, I don't think so either, Allison. Sue Ellen?
So Ellen?
I like the idea of an extension. I wanted to introduce this idea early because I heard about the idea of observing and keeping records, partly because I think there is a supportive function through the weekly meetings that I was hearing about. And I imagine it might be really helpful to the business community to keep those meetings going on and the sharing of helpful support, whatever that might be. And I am through conversations and engagement, which it seems to me this is a engagement part of the report. So I wondered if there was some way of using the engagement through the COVID crisis, if there is to be any, as part of coming up with a community economic development plan. Anyway, that was my idea. I'm happy to support an extension. I just didn't know if it needed to be a stop and then start again at some future time, or whether it could be just an extension and we see if there's a way to adapt the project so that it's most helpful to the community in the long run. It still comes up with a community economic development plan and that it works with the operations of the municipality and the staff involved. So I'm happy to support an extension. That's fine.
So can I put forward the motion then? I've got some wording.
Sure.
That council directs staff to request from the province an extension for completion of the rural dividend project, developing a CED plan for Bowen Island given COVID-19. So
That's almost exactly what I had, Maureen.
that's perfect. Yeah.
Just I had a whereas it's not suitable to proceed with the project given the current pandemic that we request. I'm happy with whatever.
Yeah, me too.
I'm
All the
happy.
same.
Second.
I move.
I second.
Okay, so we have a second there. Thanks, Dan. Just, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I don't think you're gonna get a fair representation going out to the business community about where we're going forward and the current issues, because the current issues are nothing like they would be in a more normal, whatever that's gonna be, situation. I don't think you'd get the input also at this point in time. So I think we need an extension, and I'm sorry to tell you that, because it would be nice to keep the whole thing rolling, but I think this is the way to go. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, go ahead, Rod.
Just a quick question. Sorry, just a quick question. And that was, I mean, a council resolution to the extension would be very strong in requesting the extension. Do you want to include a date on that extension as well?
I don't think so, my personally, but
I'd rather see how the conversation went.
yeah.
Okay.
What is there, do we have a date on there now? It's March? Did we have a date on there now?
Yeah,
March 2021?
I believe
It's not
so.
in the
Oh,
current.
Yeah, it's March 2021. It's like the 27th, I think, of March 2021. So if we, because we've been in touch with the province, because I had a feeling you guys might say that. So I've been in touch with the province just to ask them about this, and they sent us the information that we need to submit. Usually, if we ask for an extension, they do ask us to put a date on it. So they ask us to say how long. And obviously they ask us for a reason. We know what the reason is. So they may come back and ask me for a date. So if they do, I'll let you know. Because, and we all know what a difficult situation this is right now, because none of us could, well, we think COVID will be over, and, like, we don't know. I don't know if they'll ask us for one, because they all know what situation we're in. We'll just submit the report that they've given to us and see what they say, because I would imagine we're not the only ones that are in this situation. So.
Yeah, I think the business environment, well, all over the world, but particularly on Bowen Island, might be quite a bit different than when we went into this. So I think it's better to put a pause on it. Anybody else before we ask a question? Okay, go ahead. Allison.
Well, I guess the only thing I was going to point out is the province's fiscal year end is March 31st. So that is probably why it had the March 31, 2020 deadline, or 2021. So
actually, Allison, no, that's not the case.
Oh, it's not, okay.
When the grant application went in, it had timelines specified in terms of months.
Oh, months to actually deliver the project?
Yeah. And they didn't set those dates, we did.
We did, oh, okay, all right. So, so how many months worth of work is left to do?
Well, we've got the 2 phases, so we've got another, what we're in now, we're in April, we've got another year's worth of work.
Yeah, so it's gonna be tight anyway.
And if I can say,
So
I just didn't want to suddenly, I don't think anybody's saying this, but I didn't want to suddenly withdraw this project if the weekly engagement and some of the other activities of the project might be helpful to the Bowen Island economy and the community at the moment. So this is why I was introducing some possibilities for flexibility that might also be good to explore with the province. I'm not sure, but I just thought we should be flexible considering it's a changing situation. We might want to ask for flexibility.
okay, Rob.
Yeah, just a quick question. How is the funding for this? Is this all grant funding, or just let us know what the breakdown is for that?
Yeah, it's so I'm paid for by the Rural Dividend Fund, and then the municipality put in $13,000 for administration. So that's Steph to help with any administration stuff, and we put $12,000 in kind as well. That should have gone in the 2020 budget, and that was the same for administrative assistance.
So it's $100,000 grant.
So 25 from us, the rest.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, do you want to just read that one more time before we vote on it, please?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I definitely don't have it perfected, but just whereas it is not suitable to proceed with the public participation plan at this time, given the COVID-19 pandemic, that the committee of the whole recommend that council direct staff to request an extension from the province for the community economic development plan project, something like that.
All right, well, we'll see how that goes too. And if If it doesn't, we might have to change direction here. Anyway, I'll ask a question. All in favor? I've got everybody, Maureen?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that is unanimous. All right, and on that note, that brings the end of your presentation in. Thank you, Helen, that was amazing. And I'm sorry you just can't roll right through on it, but I don't think, funny days, these are funny days. So that, I will adjourn this committee of the whole then. And our next thing is a regular meeting at 6:15.
Everyone can go enjoy some dinner.
Yes, indeed.
Yay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
So the
Bye,
link
Alan.
the link to the regular council Zoom is in the email I sent with the agendas, but I'll also send it in a calendar invite now because I forgot to do that. I apologize.
We're not going to try and
Thanks, Alan.
squeeze in any closed meeting right now?
Patrick said that he would prefer if it was later, just
Okay, well, that's fine. I just
for
wanted
his
to
home
clarify.
schedule.
You
Okay,
said that
sorry
in
about that.
the email. Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
Handy, but, you
I'm
know.
gonna end the meeting now.